I've lost count of the number of people who have said to me over the years, I know what I should be doing. I have all the tools, all the books, all the plans. I just can't figure out why I can't follow through. I can't figure out why I don't do the thing that I know I should be doing and maybe have even done in the past and felt good about it. And one of the things that I want to talk about today, actually three things, is going to answer that question for you. Today, we're talking about capacity, compassion, and self care. And you've probably heard me and other people talking about these terms before, but I want to lay them out for you in a framework that helps you to understand why some days you can do things, some days you can't, and beating yourself up is never going to help you. It's never going to motivate you to do more of the things that you want to do. But this is also timely because as I'm recording this, we are inching quickly but closely to the very busy month of December. And so depending on where you are in the world, this busy holiday season may be starting even as early as kind of mid-November next week, or you may kind of have a December 1st start to your crazy season, but this typically is a season when it feels like we're more likely to end the month feeling less balanced than when we started. And last year in the Midlife Feast community, we set a mission for December to focus on self-care so that we could have a plan to end the month feeling good, feeling not harried and completely burnt out and exhausted and feeling like we have nothing left to give. So, all that being said, at the end of this episode, I'm going to share some practical strategies with you so that you can start to implement some of these if it feels like they might help you. And one of the reasons why I'm talking about this is because in December, we are talking about self-care, but we're also talking about satisfaction. So that is kind of our theme for December, is self-care and satisfaction. And I want to show you how thinking of food and nourishment as not only pleasurable, but self-care can help, I think, in that goal setting process. So the diet mentality has overcomplicated goal setting. It's like, here's the thing that you should do. Here's how you do it. Here are the 10 steps. Just go ahead and do it. But as we start talking about capacity, which is the first thing that I want to talk about, we have to remember that capacity is our willpower. It doesn't matter how much you want something if you don't have the capacity for it, physical, mental, emotional, even environmental capacity, meaning like the space that you're in. If we don't have the capacity for it, following through or just follow through of any part of it is going to feel really challenging. So let's dive in and talk about capacity. So I like to visualize things because it helps me to understand them. And so I visualize capacity like a power bank that you would have for your phone or your device. So there are things that you can charge it up. So plugging it in to another power source. So kind of to extend that to humans, that might be going to sleep charges your battery. That might be getting help from other people. But we have this finite resource of capacity that is regularly kind of drained and charged. And if you have a lot of people, things, obligations that reserve your capacity, I'm thinking children. I used to call mine barnacles. I even had a blog at one point when they were born that had barnacles in the title because it just felt like the minute my feet hit the floor, as much as I loved them, it was just this like suck. And I also had 3 kids under 3 for a while, so they really were a lot. But, we have things in our life, whether these are people, pets, other family members, jobs, whatever it is, we have things that kind of claim some of our capacity. The thing about capacity is that if you are in a low capacity day, so you haven't slept well, maybe you have a lot of things happening at work. So your physical capacity is low because you haven't slept well. Your mental capacity is low because you have a mile-long to-do list. Your emotional capacity is low because you had an argument with your partner or you're worried about your family member. It's going to be really difficult for you to think, okay, here's this nutrition goal that I'm working on. I want to put more plants on my plate. I want to have more fiber. how am I going to do that? And so decision fatigue is a thing that we've talked about before and is it's a real factor in capacity, because it's kind of like running Spotify and Google Maps at the same time while browsing your phone. So if you already have a lot of things draining your battery and you try to add something else on top of it, it's just going to zap you. So often what I hear from people, and I've been in this place in my life before too, when you're in that, I know what I should be doing, but I have absolutely no capacity to do it, or I can't even think of the next step. When we're in that low capacity, we can't try and force it. We can't say, well, I should know better. I should be doing this. Isn't food and nutrition and movement and all these things, isn't that the most important thing that I can do? Shouldn't I prioritize that? But prioritizing requires capacity as well. That's the decision fatigue piece of making the decision. What is most important? Why is it most important? How am I going to address that? So when I talk about capacity in my conversations with people, I often start with like scale of 1 to 10. Where's your capacity at today? And that just gives you a ballpark of, okay, this is where I'm at. I'm low, medium, or high. You don't have to put a number on it. Just even kind of thinking compared to times when I have felt more able to do these things. Where am I at? Because if you're in a low capacity state, your decisions have to also match that. So if you have decided that you're going to try and get 3,000 grams of protein, nobody needs to do that. But if you've decided that like protein is your thing and fiber is your thing and more plants are your thing, but you're not taking into account your capacity, it's going to be challenging to follow through on that. And you're going to feel like you're doing it wrong, and you're going to feel like you're failing, and you're going to feel like, why can't I do this? I know what I should do. Which is kind of what I started with at the beginning of this episode, because I want you to know that if you have felt that way, there is nothing wrong with you. You are just in a low capacity state for whatever reason, which is where the self-compassion comes in. Because I think it's easy to say like, oh yeah, I had a lot on my plate. I had a lot going on. It was really hard for whatever reason. But if you can't view that through a self-compassionate lens, then you are not helping your capacity. You are not increasing your capacity. You are draining it even more. Because when we feel guilty, ashamed, disappointed in ourselves, feel like we failed yet again, and why can't I do this? That also takes up capacity. That is another capacity suck. So being able to just accept with some self-compassion that for whatever reason, today, this week, this month, this year is low capacity. What is the next thing that I can access? What is one thing that I can do that might move me closer to how I want to feel? And, self-compassion is, I think, a tool that every area of our life can benefit from. I'm a really big believer in we are all doing the best we can most of the time. I don't know anybody who sets out a goal to half-ass it, although I do love lowering the bar. So maybe that's one of my new goals. But I think everybody is trying to do their best, but we can't control all the things that drain on our capacity. So when we're thinking about, okay, so I have this capacity assessment happening in my life, and on low capacity days, I need to not beat myself up. I just need to accept with self-compassion that it is what it is. And what's one thing that I can access that is adequate to meet my needs, that will help me move closer to where I'm trying to go. So I don't necessarily love the word goals. I like intentions, because I think intentions already have this built-in buffer for keeping us out of the all or nothing gutter, where it's like I've either achieved my goal or I haven't. And intention is I'm just going to keep moving towards it, understanding and knowing that I'm going to trip and, stumble and fall. But we can also think about food as nourishing more than just our nutrition needs. So if we welcome the pleasure of eating, and maybe we're in a low capacity day because we've just had a really crappy week, and we've just had a lot of attunement disruptors and people and all those things, then food can be one of the things that is actually adding to your capacity, not just physically, but also mentally and emotionally. So we have to be able to see, though, through that self-compassionate lens, that this is what it is. I was talking to somebody this week about she works shift work and she gets home at 7 o'clock on one of her shifts and then has to start a shift the next morning really early. And we were talking about which meals and meal times are most challenging. And she said, oh, it's that coming home at 7 o'clock and then getting up the next day. Supper and breakfast really kind of tends to fall apart. And there was a little bit of, kind of self-reproach in there, kind of like, oh, I keep trying, but I just can't, figure it out. I can't make it work. And even just introducing that anybody would find it hard to have lots of capacity for meal planning and prep at 7, 8 o'clock and then get up and do it again the next day. So we can forecast that, which is one of the things we're going to talk about in the end. We can forecast that and then add in a few things with self-care and self-compassion in mind. But let's flip it. Let's say you have a high capacity day. So let's say that this is a day where you wake up and you've slept well, all the stars aligned, and you wake up and you have lots of energy. Maybe on that day, you do some meal planning or prep that will serve you in the days when you're lower capacity. So I love thinking about food as not only something that nourishes us nutritionally and physically, but can also nourish, I guess, our soul. And I think we all know that food is more than just food. We celebrate with food. When somebody has a baby, we bring them food. When somebody dies, we bring them food. When we're having a birthday or an anniversary, we celebrate with food. So food nourishes us and can absolutely add to your capacity, including some of the things that you might think of as, kind of nutrition. So for example, trying to build a balanced plate that matches your capacity, so meaning you have protein, carbohydrates, and fat on the plate, is self-care. So is putting a pizza in the oven. So is having a bowl of cereal for supper, if that's where your capacity is at. So we can think about, I need to eat, it needs to be adequate, it doesn't need to be perfect, but if I have some capacity to build in some balance in a way that's going to be more filling and maybe satisfying, then it's absolutely self-care and adds to your capacity. And I think sometimes we get lost in the discussion about self-care as thinking that that we need to prioritize it, because the word prioritize, I think it's overused, especially when we're talking about what, we need to do to take care of ourselves, that we need to prioritize self-care, that it's not a luxury. And so if we're not being careful about how we use that language, it is not going to be adding to anyone's capacity. So self-care simply means, to me, and I'm sure everyone has a slightly different definition, but self-care is putting my needs on par with everyone else's, so that I'm not always at the back. I like to say that it's how I put my oxygen mask on first. So, I start most days with a bit of a self-reflection. Where's my capacity at mentally, physically, emotionally, and what do I need today? And this is an important practice where you can become attuned, which is one of the things we work on in intuitive eating, to things like capacity, not just hunger and fullness. And I'll give you another example. So as I'm recording this, my husband is on week 1, not even through the first week, but week 1 of a 3-week work trip. And it's in November. We are, like I said, barreling towards December. And when he's home, we typically share close to 50-50 of the meal responsibilities in our house. So before he left, he said, what can I do to help? And we don't have a lot of freezer space. We don't have a lot of fridge space because small Dutch kitchen. But what I said was, hey, can you stop at IKEA on your way home one night and pick up 3 bags of meatballs? Because on low capacity days, knowing that those meatballs are in the freezer, that I can throw them in the oven, that I can put together a meal that is reasonably balanced, meaning there's protein, we can have mashed potatoes or whatever other kind of starch or carbohydrate. We can just do like cut up veggies, whatever. I can have that on the table easily. It's even something my kids could cook, and we usually have lots of leftovers from it. So that is kind of how I anticipated or forecasted, which we're going to talk about in a second, that I was going to have some low capacity days. And what could I add in that would make those days easier? And knowing that I was going to feel more relaxed, I was going to be able to just relax with my kids in the evening and not be kind of stressing about food was my why. I wanted to plan as much downtime relaxation as I can, solo parenting for 3 weeks. So that's just some of the ways that I like to think about capacity, self-compassion, and self-care as being part of this trio, this framework that you can use to still move forward with your goals. So we tend to get caught up in all or nothing thinking. The diet mentality tells us that we're either doing it perfectly or not at all, and that there's only one way to do it. And if we can't do it that one way, that there's something wrong with us. And that's just not true. It's not true, and it's not real life, and it is not helping anyone. So if you do have gentle nutrition goals, you are trying to improve your health or how you feel in your body or your relationship with food, try asking yourself first, where is my capacity at? And if you're in a low capacity period of your life, trying to see that and accept that with self-compassion instead of beating yourself up for it. And then trying to think of food as a self-care tool. So not necessarily self-improvement, because that can be very different than self-care, but really, how can I make a decision about my next meal, the next thing I'm going to eat, with self-care in mind that matches where my capacity is at? Because without self-compassion, we just pile on, and that just never feels good. It feels, it's defeating. And I like to say that, shame is a terrible motivator. It motivates no one to do anything. The only thing it motivates us to do is to hide. So wear your low capacity badge, ask for help, and just know that everybody has low capacity days when they need it. So I want to give you some practical suggestions. So as I said, it's November, we're heading into December, and I know that this can be a challenging time, especially with rhythms and routines, as I like to call it, because we have all kinds of things thrown in that disrupt those rhythms and routines. So how can you think about capacity, self-compassion, self-care? So I shared the example about IKEA, and that is a great way to think about forecasting as well. So let's actually dive into forecasting. I'm a little all over the place today, but forecasting is my preferred word over planning. So if we're planning something, I think of steps. I think of this step, then that step, then that step. It's like a to-do list, and the goal is to do them all, probably in that order. And if you don't do them all, it feels like you've done something wrong. Or maybe that's how you get stuck in the all or nothing thinking. It's like, well, I skipped step 3, 4, and 5, so am I even really doing it? Forecasting, though, is about anticipating your needs. So forecasting might be, I'm going to look ahead to this week. Am I going to have some low capacity days or meals? Am I going to have some high capacity days or meals? And being able to then match kind of your intentions with your capacity based on your forecasting allows for, I think, a more attuned plan, I guess, even though I'm trying not to use that word. It's hard not to. But thinking about forecasting, so we use something in the Midlife Feast called 3-2-1 forecasting. And it's just a little fun way of being able to forecast anticipated needs and meals. And it's a short-term forecast. So we're looking at, 48, 72 hours. We're not looking at the week or the month. We're really trying to say, what do I know with reasonable certainty in the next 2 to 3 days that is going to either add to my capacity or take away from my capacity? So you can think about forecasting instead of planning. Also connect your kind of intentions or goals to your capacity and focus on how you want to feel, not how it's going to change how you look or how it's going to, change the number on the scale. So things like making snacks ahead of time will reduce decision fatigue, which, like I said, is like running all the apps on your phone at the same time. Think about how can you build what I like to call a nutrition capsule wardrobe. So capsule wardrobes are designed to make the process of deciding what to wear, or in this case, what to eat, easier because you already know that it fits your life. You already know that it's going to meet whatever need. Thinking about like clothing, something in your capsule wardrobe might be versatile and you can wear in different temperatures. Maybe it's something that, turns into a raincoat, or maybe it's something that has different color palettes so you don't have to think about what you're mixing and matching it with. We do the same thing with a nutrition capsule wardrobe. So we're trying to add recipes, meals to this wardrobe that are multi-purpose, multifunction, that meet everyone's needs, so that when you're in a low capacity state, or you just want something easy and your go-tos, you're thinking, okay, yeah, I'm going to do this. So these might be types of meals. So whether that's in an Instant Pot or a slow cooker or a soup, or things you can freeze or take out of the freezer or order, whatever it is, you're just trying to build this capsule wardrobe of ideas so that you don't have to think about it all the time, because we want to avoid thinking, because that's a big drain on our batteries. And instead of focusing on the end goal, and because I think we're hardwired to do that in some ways. We're certainly taught that, keep your eye on the prize, focus on the goal. In low capacity times, that is going to feel like climbing Mount Everest. And nobody needs that. So instead of trying to think about your end goal, maybe it's what's the one closest thing that will move you closer. So I'm going to use fiber as an example, because oftentimes that's a goal that people come into the midlife feast with is, I'm trying to learn about fiber, I'm trying to learn about soy, or I'm trying to learn about protein. And initially there's that excitement and they just want all the things and all the recipes. But think about what can you add to your plate at your next meal that will honor that intention. So if it's fiber, maybe that's adding a plant to your plate. If it's adding more protein, maybe it's sprinkling some nuts and seeds on whatever you're having, or maybe it's adding, another source of protein, like leftover meat or whatever it is. Instead of thinking like, am I going to get to my goal of the day, of the week? Am I going to achieve the outcome that I hope this thing is going to do for me? Bring it back to, what decision can I make at my next meal? That is the self-compassion. That is the self-care. That is how you still honor your intentions. That is how you still make goals or intentions, even when you're low capacity, but you do it in a flexible and forgiving way that is keeping you out of the diet mentality and still leaving you feeling like you're moving forward, regardless of how slow it feels like you're going. So I hope that this kind of discussion about compassion and capacity and self-care is helpful as we head into this holiday season. If you're looking for more support, I would love to support you along with other feasters in the community. We have a great month of things lined up, and we'll be getting started in early December. But if you join now or anytime, we have lots of resources that are already ready and waiting for you, including resources to teach you my 3-2-1 method that I was talking about earlier, about forecasting, how to build a gentle nutrition capsule wardrobe, and other ways that you can honor your health and your nutrition with self-care in mind. Thanks for joining.